Hello, my friend, and welcome to a presentation on the subject of depression. Now, I've decided to do a presentation on depression because this is a very personal subject for me. Over 5 years ago, in what now seems like a lifetime ago, I suffered with a chronic state of depression that lasted for over a year and a half. This depression was the resulting endgame of me spending 2 decades living with a chronic substance addiction that took me on a long and messy tumble down to that lonely and hard place known as the rock bottom. And on the way down, I suffered multiple relapses, umpteen career failures, 2 catastrophic bankruptcies, and several mental breakdowns where I found myself homeless and with a few spells down and out on the streets, until finally I bottomed out. And way back then, my life was this bitter, sour symphony. Every bridge to those that I loved was blown to smithereens with broken promises. I had submerged into the cold and desolate depths of an apocalyptic despair. I was emotionally ripped apart like a train wreck of derailed nerves. The dark clouds of destitution, they had beaten me down into 7 shades of black and blue. It was a real scary time, which I thought I'd lost my marbles. My mind was completely bruised and broken, and in every way that I viewed myself, I was this grotesque mess. And there was many nights that I cried myself to sleep and suffered alone in my silence. It reached a final crescendo on one not so fine day when I contemplated my ugly abyss. And in my darkest hour, I searched deep inside for answers. I was asking myself, why do I keep making the same mistakes? Why does everything that I do always lead to more suffering? And why can't I be a decent man? And unable to see beauty inside the beast, sadly, I reasoned that I would rather be dead than continue feeling those excruciating pains of staying alive. However, in my moment of reckoning, I also experienced a profound spiritual awakening which led me onwards and upwards to overcome depression and cultivate a life that expresses my true nature, where today I am a spiritual guide, humanitarian, and the founder of the Grace Trust, a charity organization. And so, in this presentation, I speak about depression from experience, from the heart, from expertise, and with the wisdom to assist others to both recognize, understand, and overcome this awful and debilitating condition. And in this presentation, together we will explore the 14 symptoms of depression so that you can identify whether or not you do suffer with this condition. And I will also outline the definitive cause of depression, because when you know why and how depression takes effect, you also have a gauge and point of reference in which to make necessary changes and adjustments. And I will also provide you with multiple solutions in which to treat and overcome depression. So let's get into this. It is reported that around 300 million people worldwide live in a state of depression, and that almost everyone will at some stage experience some degree of depression in their lives, with a large majority of people that will live with an undiagnosed depression. So, what does it actually mean to have depression? Well, depression is an invisible disability in that everything can appear to be fine on the outside. Your life can seem normal in that you have everything that you need, and yet inside of you there is a growing darkness, sadness, and emptiness. And with the condition of depression, we are not all in the same boat together. Yes, we may be riding through a similar storm, and yet some people have luxury mega yachts, some people have small dinghies, some people are in the sea with a life jacket, and some people are in the sea without a life jacket as they barely tread water whilst on the brink of drowning. And the quality of your life in terms of how good or bad your circumstances are when it comes to finances, when it comes to your environment, when it comes to your relationships, when it comes to your home even, when it comes to the options that are available to you, when it comes to your intelligence and knowledge, all of these different factors will play a pivotal role in how subtle or severe the symptoms of your depression are. Even so, depression is a mental health issue that can strike anyone at any time, and there are various reasons why people get depressed. Depression is a multifaceted condition that has emotional, mental, physical, relational, social, financial, and spiritual symptoms. Depression can also be the result of genetic, environmental, biological, and psychological factors, and depression can be connected to some type of recent or past abuse, trauma, or violence. And all of those conditions and factors of depression can be summarized into an actual causation of depression, of which I will share with you near the end of this presentation. Furthermore, depression can have subtle to severe symptoms and thus affect someone in a major or minor way, and depression can have acute to chronic symptoms where its effect is short-lived or prolonged. Depression can be triggered by a singular tragic experience that quickly spirals someone into a low state of grief, sadness, and despair. Or depression can gradually develop over months or years as the result of various life experiences that slowly debilitates one into a lowly and negative state of being. So, for example, with acute depression, a tragic life event such as a huge failure or loss, the end of a career or relationship, or the death of a loved one can trigger a bout of depression. The bout of depression meaning that there is a period of severe affliction and grievance that, over time, will subside, and then life returns back to a new normal where there is a different way of coping and living with the tragedy and finding new joy to be had in life. With chronic depression, the grief and despair persists and deepens. There is a prolonged state of negativity where, despite your best efforts to get over it, the depression will continue on for months and years, where your psyche is engulfed with a feeling of despondency and dejection. And this prolonged form of depression is known as clinical depression or major depression. Now, acute depression is easier for someone to recognize because they can associate their negative state to an immediate experience. Because this happened, I feel this way. However, chronic depression that has spanned across many years as a result of various and unrelated experiences is harder to detect and often goes unrealized and undiagnosed. It's also important to know that there are two different types of depression. There is functioning depression and non-functioning states of depression. With functioning depression, someone has learned to live with their condition and they still engage with normal activities. With non-functioning depression, it is a struggle just to get through the day, to get through the hour or even the next moment. Non-functioning depression is the most debilitating because it renders the individual into a dysfunctional state of being and doing, where one is drowning within a very dark experience where there is minimal activity, no joy, no hope, a low sense of self-worth, and it seems like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. It can feel like you are living a Groundhog Day nightmare. Everything has decreased in motion as you seem to be going through the same uninteresting motions every day, frozen in time and frozen in space, whilst everyone that you know is moving forward, moving on with their life, where you can feel like you are just existing, just counting the days away, just floating through this reality like a ghost without a house to haunt. Also, with a major depression, there is an imbalance of biochemicals in the brain. There is a disruption and dysfunction of the sacred secretions that are responsible for happiness, pleasure, motivation, and reward. And those biochemicals are called melatonin, serotonin, and dopamine. And the production of these biochemicals is affected by the conditions of both your internal and external environments. And as long as there is a deficiency in these sacred secretions, then the state of depression will last. So, now that we have explored the forces and factors of depression, let's define the symptoms. There are 14 common symptoms of depression, and before I outline these 14 symptoms, it is important to note that the symptoms of depression do not manifest the same for everyone. There are no definitive or set stages and procedures to the symptoms that follow. There is no rhyme or melody to the symptoms of depression. And so these 14 common symptoms of depression that I'm about to share are not in chronological order. Furthermore, according to the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, in order for you to be diagnosed with clinical depression, which is also known as major depression and major depressive disorder, you would need to exhibit at least 5 of the following symptoms of depression. So let's get started. Let's explore these 14 common symptoms of depression. Number 1, you have an imbalanced emotional state. The imbalanced emotional state, perhaps, is the most prominent and debilitating symptom of depression. So what exactly does it mean to be in an imbalanced emotional state? Well, the imbalanced emotional state is one of 2 conditions of being. You have a negative and inactive state of being, or you have an irregular and active state of being. And let's delve into what both of those mean right now. The negative and inactive state of being is common with those who suffer with non-functioning depression. In this state of being, there is zero passion, no inspiration, enthusiasm, or motivation for life, whereby you are feeling low, inert, lifeless, lethargic, stagnant, and sluggish, where you suffer a deep mental anguish that can feel like a dark cloud that has descended upon you, around you, smothering you, and that follows you around wherever you go, where every day it can feel like things are getting worse, and it's such a poor emotional state that it can render you fatigued and bedridden, where it is a struggle to muster energy to do anything. And then we have the irregular and active state of being, which is common for those who suffer with functioning depression. With the irregular and active state of being, you can experience severe mood swings, swinging from one extreme to the other, where you can fluctuate between feeling lively, upbeat, and good one moments, and then for no rhyme or reason, you can feel low, sullen, miserable, and withdrawn. You can be angered and enraged one minute, then solemn and with tears the next, which is to say that your emotions are irregular. They are up and down, polarized, wild, and mercurial. In this irregular and active state of depression, it's like you are living on this roller coaster ride of ups and downs, and you can't see whether or not an up or down is coming. You are blindfolded to the twists and turns. You are just along for the ride and with no self-control over what happens next. And in both types of imbalanced emotional states, whether you are shifting between polarized emotions or stuck in a low state, the experience can be confusing, irritating, frustrating, and overwhelming, very difficult and disturbing to live with. And as you will come to understand as you get further into this presentation, the imbalanced emotional state is the result of unresolved thoughts and emotions. When left unresolved and therefore unmetabolized, our thoughts and emotions are repressed into the unconscious realm of the mind, whereby out of our awareness and control, they act upon us autonomously, involuntarily, and reactively. Which is why, when depressed, we can experience uncontrollable fluctuations in mood, perception, and attitude, where there can even be emotional outbursts of annoyance, grief, anger, and aggressiveness. Which brings us onto the emotional state of anxiety, because anxiety and depression are the twin sisters of doom. Both anxiety and depression are inextricably linked. They are two separate conditions that occur concurrently, and they both go together like a heavy ball and chain. With anxiety, the unresolved thoughts and emotions become a neuroticism that elicits worry, nervousness, apprehension, unease, and uncertainty over particular circumstances, experiences, and outcomes. And when coupled to depression, there can be a feeling of empty dread, pending doom, and heavy despair, which is usually coupled to a strong desire for something to happen, for something to change and be different. And if one feels entrapped and overwhelmed by the anxiety, it can lead to moments of intense trepidation or panic attacks. Which brings us on to the next symptom of depression, is that you have negative thoughts aimed towards yourself, towards others, and towards reality itself. When aimed towards yourself, you can think dreadful things about the way you look, the way you feel, the way you behave, and the way that you are unable to live a normal and happy life. When aimed towards others, you can be resentful towards the way others perceive you, the way others treat you, the way others perhaps live a life that appears to be better, easier, and more joyful than yours. And when aimed towards reality, you can think cynical and pessimistic thoughts about your circumstances, your environment, your work, your society, and your future outlook. You see, with a depressed state of thinking and perceiving, we can get caught within a negative feedback loop of overlaying negative thoughts onto our experiences that reaffirms and reinforces why we think and feel negatively. Through repetition of thinking negatively, we can unknowingly condition the mind with negative thought patterns, whereby our perception becomes this filter of skepticism, fear, insecurity, and doubts, where you can almost always look on the dull side of life and make worst case scenario predictions. You can ruminate with unpleasant thoughts about past negative events, which then also becomes the barometer in which you gauge and catastrophize the situations of your life today. In a depressed state, you are almost always downcasting reality with questions that presuppose things are getting worse, where the mind is fixated upon the what ifs, the what if this goes wrong, what if this gets worse, what if it will always be this bad, what if it never gets better, what if I can't do this, what if I have a bad experience. And unless these fears and skepticisms are resolved, that voice inside your head that expects and prophesies doom, it just grows louder and more dominant, whereby the anxiety of what you think will be disturbing to think of, will be difficult to reconcile and make sense of, and will be disruptive to the way that you conduct yourself. Disruptive to a point that you become doubtful, distrustful, and suspicious of most things. And because there is an intense apprehension that something bad is likely to happen, coupled to a simultaneous thought that nothing good will happen either, you become hesitant and reluctant and withdrawn from life. Because if you think things will always be bad and never good, why bother trying to do anything, right? And perhaps the most harming element of negative thinking is to self-condemn. With depression, you can get into a negative pattern of blaming the self. You can blame yourself as being the reason that bad things always happen. You can blame yourself for not getting things right. You can blame yourself for feeling like a failure. You can blame yourself for feeling that you are unworthy of attention and love. You can blame yourself for not being able to keep up with your usual activities, responsibilities, and promises to others. You can feel like you deserve your bad outcomes, deserve to feel bad, deserve to not have anything nice happen, and feel like you deserve to be punished for your inability to function properly. You may even blame yourself for upsetting and hurting people because of your inability to function properly or be well as the people in your life would hope and insist that you would be. You may even blame yourself for experiences that are completely beyond your control. When blaming the self, we then experience a sense of guilt, regret, and shame over what we have or have not done. We can experience a shameful sense of abandonment and disloyalty for not being able to remain consistent with or contribute help to others. You can pull yourself and your life apart as you look at everything wrong and unworthy about who you are and what you've done, as you criticize, disapprove of, and loathe even the way that you think, feel, and behave. And all of this stinking thinking, along with its counterpart of negative self-talk, it just makes the depression get lower, get more intense, and get worse. The next symptom is that you have irregular sleep patterns. Depression can alter your sleep patterns, causing you to oversleep or undersleep. There is a sleeping fluctuation and deficiency which affects your hormone production, and your circadian sleeping rhythm is thrown off, which triggers an irregular sleep pattern. So what defines an irregular sleeping pattern? The irregular sleeping patterns are when you either sleep a lot or your sleeping patterns fluctuate. And it's common to sleep a lot with depression because you constantly feel fatigued, low, and miserable, and thus going to sleep often is what gives you a break from the brightness, the busyness, and the brashness of a reality that perhaps you find too difficult, too demanding, and too unappealing to stay awake for. And because the feeling of depression is irritating, upsetting, and at times unbearable to live with, sleep has become a place of escapism, to escape and get relief from that heaviness and darkness of feeling so low. Because it just feels better to be asleep than awake, and because when you are asleep, you don't have to feel the pains of reality. You have escaped from the stress and misery of being alive. However, depression can cause a fluctuation in sleeping patterns. You can fluctuate between being very sleepy to suffering insomnia. And that's usually a result of the anxiety that comes with depression. This means that for some people, the anxiety of what they think and feel about the troubled aspects of their life can arise at nighttime, just before or just as they put their head down on the pillow. And this is when the mind comes alive and the thoughts are racing on speed dial, and so it's impossible to go to sleep, which usually results in tossing and turning until the wee early hours of the morning, when eventually, and only through sheer exhaustion, do you get a wink or two of sleep. And because you haven't rested well, as a result, the next morning you are still feeling tired, fatigued, and sluggish throughout the day. This overriding anxiety that disturbs our sleeping patterns is the result of you having unprocessed and unresolved aspects of your life that are playing on your mind. And this anxiety tends to flare up at night because it's only at nighttime, when the mind is free from distractions, that those parts of your life are no longer repressed. And because at nighttime is typically when the mind organically reflects, contemplates, and tries to reconcile life. So the next symptom is that you have an irregular appetite. The irregular appetite is common with depression, and the irregular appetite can either be a loss or gain in appetite. With a loss in appetite, you often miss meals and eat less. There is a lack of desire for food, where even your favorite foods that used to bring you so much pleasure can actually repulse you. And over time, this lack of appetite can cause you to lose a significant amount of weight, which may alert close friends, family members, significant others, or co-workers. They might start to think and question that something is not right or well with you, which can alarm and deeply concern you. Even so, a loss of weight is not necessarily a bad thing if it is a loss of toxic fats. On the flip side of this, with depression, some people actually gain appetite. They start to eat more, which is usually a coping mechanism, where the food is providing some type of pleasurable relief that also countervails those negative emotions of feeling bad. And of course, overeating can result in weight gain, which is a bad thing when that additional weight gained is toxic in nature. And to conclude this symptom of depression with both a loss and gain of appetite, if these irregular appetites are prolonged, it is possible that you would develop an eating disorder or food addiction, which will also antagonize your imbalanced emotions and aggravate the existing depression. The irregular appetite is linked to an imbalanced emotional state. With the next symptom of depression, you are highly sensitive. You are highly sensitive to the experiences of life that are within and without. And what do I mean by this? Well, if you are highly sensitive to your experiences within, then you are acutely aware of, attuned with, and affected by your memories, thoughts, and emotions. And to such a point that what you experience within overrides your ability to perceive the world objectively, and therefore you always colour reality with a personal bias. And in the case of depression, the experience of negative memories, thoughts, and emotions within those sensitivities, they cause you to shade reality a lot darker and bleaker. And they make you highly sensitive to your experiences without, whereby you are acutely aware of and attuned with and triggered by experiences out there in your surroundings, in the situations that you encounter, and to such an extent that the reality out there can unnerve, repulse, and agitate you, which makes it difficult to resonate with the positive aspects of reality which are out there. And because when you wear dark shades, everything is dark. You are sensitive to the dark, but insensitive to the light. And because of this sensitivity, you are cautious and hypervigilant in that you are lightning quick to both detect and react to even the slightest and subtle of changes to your environments, both within and without. When highly sensitive, you are thin-skinned and penetrable. You are easily influenced, offended, disturbed, distressed, and upset by people and situations in your life that you think and feel are having a negative impact. You are easy prey to anything or anyone that can easily inflame, betray, and hurt your feelings, in that your bubble of certainty, security, peace, and comfort can be easily burst. You may even become highly reactive and overreactive. You may get extremely upset over the most trivial things. You may lash out at your friends and loved ones. You may say and do things that, upon reflection, you didn't really mean and you wish you'd never said. Sensitivity can make you hesitant, reluctant, defensive, and evasive towards life. Your sensitivity can make you withdraw from life, withdraw from people, and out of harm's way. Rather than be exposed to that which threatens your well-being, you prefer to be alone because you feel more secure and safe and comfortable to be alone. So this symptom, this topic begs the question, why and how did you become highly sensitive? Well, sensitivity has two main components to it, and these two components of sensitivity are psychological and spiritual. In terms of psychology, you are sensitive because this is your natural temperament, or you are sensitive because of a deep-rooted fear, insecurity, trauma, or shame that you have internalized as the result of some type of shocking and tragic event that took place in the distant or near past. And because of this past event, you are now acutely aware of and easily triggered by any experience that happens today or in the future that reminds you of that past event and elicits the negative state of fear, insecurity, trauma, or shame. In terms of spirituality, you could, knowing or unknowingly, have a strong connection with your higher senses. The higher senses go beyond the normal five senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. If you have a strong connection with the higher senses, then you are highly intuitive, empathic, imaginative, prescient, clairvoyant, or psychic, in that you can sense and experience reality beyond the mundaneness of this 3D reality. This means that you see, think, hear, and feel what others don't. This means that the experience of reality for you is a lot more high definition, intense, penetrating, heartfelt, and heavy on the soul. And you are especially sensitive to the pains of the world and sensitive to the pains of other people. Now, these supernatural powers can be put to good use. However, if you are unaware of these supernatural powers, if they remain undeveloped and unchanneled, these supernatural powers can consume you. They can be a curse. They can make you feel estranged, strange, different, unable to make sense of self, or unable to connect with people and fit in with this life. Because the way you perceive, experience, and express yourself is so different and otherworldly. However, when harnessed towards helping others, your supernatural powers can make you more connected with nature and people. In terms of an astrological aspect of spirituality, you could be experiencing depression because you are more attuned with the darker side of your astral force, your star sign. Astrology is the science of nature and the science of human nature, in that we were born with a spiritual blueprint that is connected to the energetic imprint of the star constellations that we were born under. And that spiritual blueprint has positive and negative attributes. And unfortunately, many people do align with the negative attributes of their astral force, and this takes them down the dark pathway in life. And if you want to discover your spiritual blueprint, then this can be done by getting a natal chart, a birth chart interpretation, a reading, which will provide you with the attributes of the star constellations that you were born under. Moving on to the next symptom of depression, you are isolated. Isolation can be physical or psychological or both, which means that you could isolate in close or distant proximity. With close proximity, you isolate even though you are with people. You isolate even though you share accommodation with people. This can mean that you are isolating your innermost thoughts and feelings from people, in that you are remaining quiet. This can also mean that you spend more time doing other activities than you do engaging and communicating with people. where essentially you live in a paradox of being alone with everybody. And with the advent of digital technology, we can easily isolate ourselves and lose track of time when fixated upon and consumed with social media and computer-based work projects. With digital devices, it has become very easy, comfortable, and convenient to isolate in close proximity. With distant proximity, you isolate in a space that is away from people, where nobody is able to see or contact you. You can start to isolate indoors alone, where you prefer to stay indoors than go outside because the outside world has become too noisy, too bright, too overwhelming, too much of an effort, and so you only leave the house for bare essentials. You only do the things that you absolutely must, that are necessary for survival, like getting food and toiletries. Even so, when you do go outside the house, it could be like climbing Mount Everest. Very challenging and fraught with fears and insecurities. So, whether it be distant or close proximity isolation, you are alone and separated from people in that you are not relating to people in person. And one of the fundamental human needs that is necessary for good health and well-being is social interaction and intimacy with others. We do need to be able to relate with people in which to share ideas, concerns, and stories and have entertaining fun together. We do need friendships and family to express ourselves, to be heard, to be loved, to be comforted, and to feel needed. And I say relating to people in person because most people tend to isolate and connect to other people through social media. However, this is not real connection. This is artificial and superficial connection that is convenient, lazy, and addictive, and that will keep you in isolation. Also, I want to make a clear distinction between sudden isolation and gradual isolation. With sudden isolation, it typically follows after some type of dramatic, life-changing event that made you recoil back from life, that made you fearful of exposure, that made you hesitant about what direction to take in life, that made you feel like it was pointless in trying to do things and connect with people because you fear potential harm, loss, and failure. With gradual isolation, you slowly start to cut yourself off from people more and more, where you meet people less and less. You start going out less. You start spending less time socializing with those you know. You start to reduce your social circle. You start to limit your outdoors activities. You start to limit the radius in which you travel from your home. You choose to be alone more and more in a room. And this gradual isolation can take place over several months, years, and decades even. And it also must be said that there are positive and negative aspects of isolation. Isolation is sometimes necessary when we need to remove ourselves from people, from situations, and from environments that are harmful to our well-being and a hindrance to our personal development. And if the space that we isolate in is conducive to good health, in that we can rest, recuperate, rejuvenate, and get some well-needed healing, then isolation time alone can have a huge psychological benefit, especially when we use our time wisely to process our life in terms of doing some reflection, contemplation, and meditation. When we use our time wisely to study and learn new knowledge that has practical use. And when that period of isolation is followed by a reintegration with society, with the great outdoors, in that we can return back to life with this renewed vigor and revitalized perception that has improved the quality and outlook of our life. Isolation, however, is the worst thing to do when you isolate in conditions that are detrimental to your well-being. When you are perhaps isolating in a property that has negative and intruding people that are disturbing your peace and sanctuary. Isolation is bad when you hibernate in a room that is unkept, littered, disorganized, dark, and where there is hardly any outside contact. Isolation is unproductive when your mind is hijacked by digital stimulation. And those aforementioned things is what will make depression fester, aggravate, and worsen. Moving on to the next symptom of depression, you self-abuse and self-sabotage. Depression occurs and prolongs when we abuse and sabotage who we are and what we do. In terms of self-abuse, this means that you are engaging with bad, immoral, toxic, depraved, sinful, and degenerative behaviors. You are consuming and doing things that are degrading the quality of your life. And by degrading the quality of your life, I mean that you are consuming and doing things that are making you poorer, weaker, slower, deficient, damaged, disordered, incapable, infirm, and diseased, both mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, whereby your behavior is resulting in some type of personal loss, harm, and injury. In terms of self-sabotage, you are doing things that deliberately limit, restrict, obstruct, avoid, damage, or destroy even an aspect of your life. With self-sabotage, you behave in a way that prevents a certain aspect of your character from developing, and you prevent yourself from procuring certain outcomes that you truly need and desire. You are holding back from life. You are not following through in life. You are doing certain things or not doing certain things that keeps negative situations as they are, or this makes those situations worse for you. So we need to ask, if you are making things bad and worse for you, and that results in some type of harm, loss, and injury, then why would you continue to do that to yourself? You continue with behaviors that self-abuse and self-sabotage because they have become conditioned behaviors that come with a positive compensation. Conditioned behaviors means that they have become internalized, habitual, autonomous, involuntary, and reactive behaviors whereby you have limited self-awareness and minimal self-control. Positive compensations means that you are getting some type of relief, comfort, shelter, security, pleasure, reward, or value as the result of you engaging with an act of self-abuse or self-sabotage, in that the negative experience comes attached with a positive gain. And when the psychology has been corrupted and perverted with self-sabotaging and self-abusive characteristic traits, the only way is down on this downward spiral of negative reactions and actions that results in negative consequences more than less. And when that downward spiral is compounded over time, there is a build-up a retention, a blockage of internalized negative experiences and energy. And this then manifests within you as the chronic states of anxiety, distress, misery, and of course, depression, which leads us on to the next symptom of depression. You self-compress. What does it mean to self-compress? Well, let me begin this by saying to compress means to flatten, reduce, compact, and lessen. Therefore, when we self-compress, we are flattening, reducing, compacting, and lessening certain aspects of our life. We are compressing certain aspects of our life away from our awareness and experience. And we compress certain aspects of our life because we find them too negative, difficult, upsetting, and intolerable to live with. And so we compress them out of our awareness as a way of coping, as a way of getting relief from the self and escapism from circumstances that we can't face and deal with. And there are three interrelated ways that we compress from our awareness and experience the parts of our life that we struggle to make sense of and live with. And those three interrelated ways of self-compressing are the act of suppression, the act of absorption, and the act of repression. So let's talk about those three different ways we self-compress. With the act of suppression, we alleviate from negative thoughts and feelings about self and life by using the transcendental powers of comfort foods, alcoholic drinks, illicit and prescriptive drugs. Because these stimulants and soothers have immediate state-changing powers that subdue bad thinking and bad emotions whilst providing feel-good, pleasurable sensations that make us feel at ease, comforted, uplifted, and in some cases, euphoric. The same state-changing properties can also be found in the use of digital stimuli. When we are focused on social media, listening to music, gaming, watching movies, etc., these mind-entertaining portals, they distract and pacify the mind into a heightened trance-like state. With the act of absorption, this means that our depression is pacified by a process known as emotional transference. Emotional transference means that we are being emotionally affected within by something that is without. So, with the act of absorption, your negative thoughts and emotions are being pacified by something that resonates with how you think and feel. So, think of those sad songs that tug on your heartstrings. Think about those tear-jerking films and documentaries that move you. These are external stimulations that pacify the way you think and feel. And by pacify, I mean that what you resonate with, it quells your upset, it quells your agitation, quells your anger. When pacified, you are being appeased, soothed, calmed, and composed by that which you emotionally resonate with and consume. However, pacification does not mean liberation. Just because you have had your thoughts and emotions soothed by something or someone that you feel recognizes, expresses, and understands the way that you think and feel, does not mean that you have processed and transcended those thoughts and feelings. They have been temporarily soothed until the next time that you are triggered into a negative state. The other way that we self-compress with the energy that we consume is when we absorb more negative energy. So think about those shocking news channels that invoke upset within you. Think about those friends or family members that are always complaining about life. Think about the job or task that you struggle with and moan about. Think about the problems that won't go away and that you are always fretting over. Each time that we ruminate over negative thoughts and emotions, each time that we interact with a specific negative stimulus in the environment, each time that we are picking up on, reacting to, and reflecting back negative energy, we are reinforcing that negativity within. We are making it more dense, more compact, and reinforcing it with a more stronger effect. We are conditioning the mind and body to be acutely aware of and locked into negativity out there that resonates with the negativity within. Which brings us to the act of repression. With repression, we reject and deny our negative thoughts and feelings. We use conscious will to inhibit those thoughts and feelings that make us feel bad. We ignore them. We tell ourselves little white lies. We omit, ignore, and distort certain facts. We focus on anything other than the truth. We are deceiving ourselves that everything is fine when it is not. And the reason that we put our most troubling thoughts and feelings to one side is because we feel that they are too uncomfortable and painstaking to deal with, because we think they are inappropriate, that we shouldn't be feeling this way, because they are too inconvenient to deal with in the moment and at this time, because we simply can't deal with them. And so through conscious will, we repress them out of the mind. The negativity gets repressed back down into the unconscious aspect of the mind and out of the awareness. The unconscious part of the mind is where all of our unknown, unexplored, unresolved, undeveloped, and unrestrained aspects of self are contained. And so with those three interrelated ways of self-compression, when we suppress, absorb, and repress, we are not dealing with the internal and external issues that contribute towards and petrify the condition of depression. And it is vital that you know that self-compression is the enemy of self-awareness and self-healing. You can't heal from depression when you don't deal with depression in a psychotherapeutic way. It is only by decompressing from and resolving that negativity within, when you release and then make sense of those negative thoughts and emotions, that you can heal and harmonize the mind and body. However, when we continually self-compress, we numb, dumb, and blunt the mind and body. We distract ourselves from and defer the experience of the negative energy within. The negativity within goes unexpressed. It gets locked within and becomes the dark energy that percolates with the symptoms of anxiety and depression, that inflicts the mind with a subtle to severe neurosis, that becomes the sensitivity towards anything or anyone that resonates with and reminds us of our past negative experiences. And the next symptom is that you lack motivation and focus, which is to say that you lack a desire, willingness, and enthusiasm to engage with life, to engage with activities, to engage with purpose. There can be a loss of drive, a loss of ambition and determination. It can feel like nothing is turning you on, that there is nothing in life that seems to be stimulating you. There is no inspiration coming from within, and there is nothing much that you aspire to without. And it could be that you have even lost interest in those hobbies and experiences that once brought you so much joy and exhilaration, and therefore you may feel confused and worried as to why you don't like these anymore. And if you suffer with a non-functioning depression, you will lack motivation to do even the smallest and simplest of tasks. Even to just get out of bed and take care of your hygiene is a struggle. You just can't seem to take care of yourself. The simple acts of self-care, such as washing and grooming, can seem too hard and too energy draining. You see, the low and heavy state of depression, it can be so emotionally overwhelming, taxing and draining that you get drawn into the darkness and weight of your body. Your focus is inward-centered, weak and uninterested in anything other than the bad way that you think and feel, and so it is a real struggle for the mind to give attention to, concentrate and focus on normal everyday tasks of normal everyday living. And because the mind is more focused inwards, it has lost interest in external reality. Nothing that happens out there, nothing that anyone says to you is of relevance, resonance, or importance, and thus there is no need to be interested or remember things. You know, what goes on out there is very easy for you to ignore and forget. And as I have mentioned before, depression is a chemical imbalance of the three sacred secretions of serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine. These are the three hormones that are responsible for happiness, rest, peacefulness, feel-good sensations, and a motivational reward impulse. When these three secretions are not functioning properly and optimally, it will be very hard to near on impossible for you to experience happiness, joy, and enthusiasm. You won't have the hormonal juice in which to feel focused and motivated towards activities that could excite you and give you a sense of reward. Depression can also decrease your sexual libido, whereby you lose interest in sex with your partner, or you lose the interest to pursue sexual encounters with other people. This loss of sexual libido is connected to the chemical imbalance. And furthermore, this lack of motivation and focus can be the result of having low self-esteem, low self-worth, a poor self-image, where you believe that you have nothing of significance and value to offer to the world. So moving on to the next symptom of depression, you mask over your truth. You don't let people know what you really think and how you really feel. And why? Because you find it too intrusive, revealing, and exhausting in which to explain to people why you feel so bad. You also might not want people to judge you, frown upon you, or harass you. You might feel anxious that people will dislike, reject, or abandon you. You might feel like that nobody would understand you. You might not want to worry or concern people with your problems. So it is easier and quicker for you to pretend that everything is okay. You therefore choose to keep your problems to yourself to not alarm and concern people. You may even put on a fake smile or a fake act so that others won't think that something is wrong, where you divert the attention away from you so that people don't pry into your personal affairs and get to the truth of you. Furthermore, you mask over the way you truly think and feel because you might not even know yourself why you feel so bad. You might be confused about the way that you think and feel and unable to express those thoughts and feelings into words. And partly because of that, you feel helpless. One of the hardest parts of depression is that you feel that no one truly understands what you're going through. You can feel alienated, isolated, and alone with everybody, and even when you do have friends and family to confide in. Even if you do confide in people, it does not resonate or help when they say, "I know how you feel, I've been sad too, it's just a phase, why don't you do something productive? Just think positive, or it will get better, just give it time." And you may have even reached out to someone and received a cold, impersonal and selfish response like, "I've had it much worse than you, but I'm okay," or "You're just being dramatic, you only want attention, you're faking it, and you're not the only person in the world that suffers with this." You could also feel helpless because you struggle to ask for help. You don't dare ask people for help with your problems, concerns, because you feel too embarrassed, weak, and vulnerable to talk about the innermost, sensitive, and secret aspects of yourself and your life. You may even feel insecure that your worst fears about yourself and reality will be proved correct. The inability to seek help and admit that there is a serious problem could be because there is something about your life, circumstances, or close relationships that would be found out to be wrong, bad, incompatible, or unsurmountable. And so it is better not to ask for help than risk the possibility of there being a major disruption and life-changing event. Getting help means that you would have to admit and confront your deepest shames, regrets, fears, and insecurities, and the mere thought of that revelation could seem like a fate worse than death, and so you decide to compress those thoughts and emotions. You don't seek help because it is far easier to live with the comforting lies and put up a false facade than to face the uncomfortable truth, which is to say that we remain helpless because to ask for help would mean to be vulnerable and confess that we are weak and not coping. And if one has cultivated a stoic, tough, invincible and all-knowing persona, and if one has formed a deceptive veneer that covers up their true feelings, then it would be too embarrassing, too fraudulent, too hypercritical to then come out and be seen as someone that is totally different, totally inferior than the image of self that has been presented to other people. Some people can't reveal certain aspects of themselves because they don't want to threaten the image that they've cultivated or reveal a weakness that threatens the dynamics of a relationship, of a career, of a social interaction. And so, rather than get help, they will sadly rationalize with excuses as to why it's best that they don't. And sadly, there are many cases where people are unknowingly helpless. There are people with undiagnosed depression who are totally unaware that they even have a mental and emotional issue, and that's because over time these people have become conditioned, normalized, and familiar with a depressed state of being within the mind and body. They have unknowingly learned to live with depression as part of who they are, part of their identity, part of their reality. The next symptom of depression is that you feel hopeless. When thinking about your current circumstances and when imagining the future, you feel hopeless. You think there is no possibility of change, no possibility of happiness, no possibility of success, and so you think that things are improbable, unworkable, unreachable, and pointless. You look at certain aspects of your life and think that they are beyond hope, beyond repair, beyond ever being good again. You have resigned to the notion that things are irretrievable and irredeemable. And when hopeless and thinking about yourself and the world around you, you may be consumed with questions like, why is this happening? Why can't this stop? And why can't this be better? And every time that you think deeply about your place in the world, you experience this existential crisis where you can't see a place for you, you can't see a purpose, you can't see where you fit in, you can't see where you can make a difference. You can't see why you're here, and you can't see what you're meant to be doing or a direction forward. And so you can't see the point of trying, you can't see the point of changing, you can't see the point of reaching for something greater. And when that hopelessness reaches an all-time low, you can't see a reason to carry on. You may even find yourself preoccupied with consuming information that affirms that both you and the world that you live in are beyond hope. You might be focused on things like poverty, wars, economic issues, climate issues, the pandemic, etc. And the more that you fixate on these negative aspects of reality, the more you sink into a state of hopelessness. Thinking that things can never get better, you may even get nihilistic and start to think, what's the use of living if everything is doomed? When we feel hopeless, we tend to question our purpose and the point of this life. When these questions are outward searching, you can start to investigate different subjects of life. You can become obsessed with philosophy, sociology, religion, culture, and history. Then you can end up on this endless cycle of questioning and searching for the meaning to life, and yet the answers that you find out there will only satisfy you for a while before you move on to the next topic. That's because all the seekers ever do is go around in circles searching for the truth and meaning of reality. But here's the thing, the truth and purpose is within you. Life is what you make of it, what you create it, what you shape it, and what you live it. And that can only come from within. Furthermore, if all you ever do is go seeking, you will discover a lot of things wrong with this world. When you pull back the curtain of reality, what you discover can make you feel unnerved, unsure, and disturbed. It can worsen the depression and sense of hopelessness. When hopeless, you also experience what I refer to as the 5 dreaded Ds. You feel dejected, desperate, demoralized, defeated, and in despair. You are dejected because there is nothing in life that is impressing your soul. You are desperate because you've tried so much, because a lot of things have gone wrong, because many things have failed, because you always find yourself in tentative and tricky situations, and because you've run out of options and you don't know what to do next. You are demoralized because you've lost confidence and conviction. You feel defeated because you can't take any more hits and you can't go another round of being pummeled into submission. And you are in despair because you are suffering so much mental anguish, which leads us on to the most serious symptom of depression. You have suicidal thoughts. The most dangerous and darkest element of depression is suicidal ideation, where there is a strong and overriding feeling of not wanting to exist. This dreadful feeling can so dominate your mind and body that you must escape from being you, escape from this life, escape from reality. It's like you want to be in a different universe, a different world. You just want to be anywhere but here, anywhere than be you with that dreadful feeling. Suicidal ideation, that wanting ultimate escapism, is all about wanting those dreadful feelings that feel so bad to live with, just wanting them to go away. You feel like dying. You feel like you would rather be dead than stay alive. And in some sense, you are dying. You are dying inside of mental, emotional, and spiritual infirmness. You are dying because there is no personal growth. You are dying because you feel there is nothing worthwhile living for. And yet, all of those aforementioned things can be solved where you do come alive and start to feel passionate about life again. Now, it's important to note that suicidal ideation does not automatically mean that you want to follow through with it. It could be just an imaginative experience of wanting to escape the way you feel and live. Thoughts and feelings of suicide can be passive and fleeting. However, if you are constantly imagining death, if you are always contemplating suicide, if you are toying with the idea and you have become completely obsessed with death and dying, if you feel like there is no point going on, if you feel the world would be better off without you, if you have already planned how and when you will commit suicide, if you have mentally or physically rehearsed how you will do it, if you are at these stages that I have just mentioned, then you are not okay, my friend. If this is you, then listen very carefully to what I have to say. I know that things can seem so unbearable and pointless, but please, please, there is a positive way out of this. There is a way forward. There is something about you deep, deep within you that is of immeasurable worth, need, and love in this world. So don't give up. So don't quit. Just tie yourself to the mast and the storm will end. The storm will end and a new dawn will rise. But first you need to get help. There are people out there in this world, people that actually care about you, and that includes me. So if you are having serious thoughts about suicide, it is important that you speak with someone immediately and seek professional help. You can even reach out to me, just send me a message and I will respond so that we can both deal with this together. And in the meantime, carry on with this presentation, which brings me to the 14th and final symptom of depression. And that final symptom of depression is that you are not aligned with your true nature. Depression usually occurs when you are living a life that does not align with your true nature. You are out of alignment with your true nature. Now, what do I mean by true nature? Well, you were born into this earth with innate talents, characteristics, strengths and skills that are unique to you, and that when these are developed and expressed, you will start to cultivate a life that is passionate, purposeful and peaceful. When you are aligned with your true nature, you are operating at your most efficient and effective mode. You are getting positive lifestyle results more often than not. You are waking up each day feeling joyful and privileged to be alive. You are doing things of higher value and virtue, and that cultivates self-worth and fulfillment. However, and sadly, a great majority of people never do align with and express their true nature because rather than follow their own intuition, they were influenced by the social traditions of their environment and childhood circumstances, and thus they chose a pathway in life that deviated them from the attributes of their true nature. And those who do depart from their true nature, they tend to end up in positions, jobs, lifestyle routines, habits, and relationships that neglects aggravates, stresses, and demoralizes their true nature. Rather than live a life that reflects who they truly are, they've become entrapped with lifestyle circumstances that require they be inauthentic, fake, shallow, and materialistic, where these lifestyle circumstances have sucked the passion, the joy, and the enthusiasm out of life. They have oppressed and depressed their true nature. Furthermore, when the latent attributes of someone's true nature are left unnourished and undeveloped, it leaves a gaping void of unmet potential. That void of unmet potential then grows with intensity, grows with a yearning, with unrequited desire, with frustration, and with dissatisfaction. And thus, those who do not actualize their truest, highest, and fullest potential, they are either consumed by the suffering of that unactualized void within, or they are forever attempting to pacify that void and escape from its irritating effect, which usually leads someone into being entrapped by the many entertaining and pleasurable obsessions, fixations, and addictions that offers distraction and escapism from one's internal misery. And yet, those entrapments at the same time prevent one from confronting and then dealing with that unresolved and undeveloped void of their true nature. Right, now that we have explored those 14 symptoms of depression, did you relate to any of those mentioned? If so, and you have related to over 5 different symptoms, then it's possible that you are experiencing a state of depression. And here, right now, is where I want to share with you some aspects of depression that would actually prevent you from getting help to treat and overcome this condition. And the first thing that I want to share with you is that perhaps you have personalized the condition. You see, the one thing that prevents you from getting treatment for depression is that you have personalized its condition. And what do I mean by this? I mean that the state of depression has been internalized, accepted, integrated, and conditioned within as part of your identity. It has become a part of you. It has become a part of who you think you are as a person, in that you identify with the symptoms of depression as being this absolute, integral, and unchangeable part of your character, of yourself. Where the symptoms of depression have become such a theme in your life, such a companion, such a familiar way of being and living and identifying with the self, that even just the thoughts of not being depressed, of not having those symptoms, is something that you can't comprehend and accept. The mere idea that you could be this happy, free, vibrant, and a successful person that lives a joyful, varied, interesting, and abundant life is something that just simply doesn't register on the radar. It does not resonate with you, and where you can't imagine being that type of person, where being successful and happy and vibrant, it seems so foreign, so unidentifiable, so different, so not you. Something that would require such a monumental shift and transformation that the very idea that you could be and live as this better and greater version of yourself, and all of the things that you would need to do to become that person, is something that's too unrealistic for you, too remote, and too frightening to even dare consider. This personalization of depression can be so strong that you will have a blind spot to anything that is positive and transformative, where you are quick to dismiss anyone or any information that suggests that you could transform into someone that is happy and successful, where you are so identified with depression that you will actually defend and protect your depression, where anyone that makes a comment and suggests that you could do better will be taken as a direct attack on your character. The next thing that could prevent you from overcoming depression, from getting treatment for depression, is that you have unresolved karma. And here I'm talking about the unresolved energy of negative memories, images, thoughts, and emotions that are the result of past or present negative experiences that have been internalized and compressed within the mind and body. And this negative energy is recycling within you to become detrimental psychological conditions that limit, obstruct, and keep you depressed. That's because when unresolved negative energy amasses within the mind and body, that energy is encoded and locked within the psychoneurological and cellular fabric of the mind and body to become this consistent source of internal distress, darkness, and heaviness. And negativity is a dark, acidic, and astringent energy which makes the mind and body weak, slow, heavy, irritable, and stressed. And if throughout the years you keep experiencing and compressing that unresolved negative energy within, and there is no outlet to release its psychological and physical karma, then its internal flame will roar with ferocity and grow in pressure. That negative energy will mutate and grow more darker, volatile, intense, and reactive. That harvested negative energy is what cultivates a depressed state of being and constructs a psychological karmic time bomb. So why do we keep compressing unresolved negative energy within? Why don't we stop compressing and start decompressing that negative energy? Well, the obvious answer is that people just don't know how to. They have no knowledge of psychology and they're kind of unknowing about themselves. And a lot of people, both out of necessity and convenience, they are so busy trying to maintain a rigid lifestyle of demands, duties, and obligations that they just simply don't have time to stop. They don't have time to stop and take care of, to process their mental and physical health. And there are some people that have this die-hard mentality whereby they have chosen to go with the suck it up, get on with it, and life must go on ethos. And almost everybody has developed an unhealthy coping strategy to massage away the negative energy and get temporary pleasurable relief. And yet those unhealthy coping methods only further compress and aggravate the negative energy and essentially defers and delays the karmic effect. The negative energy that is compressed within will always find a way to express, and that growing pressure of negative energy within will find a weak spot in the mind and body's manifold, where the mind and body itself becomes the outlet for that negative energy. That's because the unresolved pressure of negative energy will percolate to the top and agitate the mind with a subtle to severe neurosis. Neurosis can be so bad that it manifests as hyper-obsessive, hypersensitive, hyper-vigilant, hyper-anxious and hyper-conscientious styles of behavior. Neurosis makes it very difficult for the mind to function optimally and consistently. And when that neurosis does reach a saturation point, that's when the psyche preserves a clamor of discontent. The miserable mind becomes this karmic cesspool of regurgitating negativity, where there is intense dislike and even hatred for the self and towards life itself. And sadly, that which is dark is avoidant of the light. As within, so without, the darkened mind peers through a sinister perspective and starts to pollute reality with toxic thoughts. Negativity also attracts negativity, so the mind projects negativity outwards, and negativity is manifested and reflected back, where one gets snagged within a negative feedback loop that keeps the bad karma alive, which leads us on to the end game of depression, and that is the apocalyptic mind. When the negative energy within has surpassed its critical mass, and the stimulants, the soothers and the distractions and all of the other ways that we self-compress and deny the negative energy, well, those methods, they no longer pacify and soothe. The ticking psychological time bomb of unresolved negative energy, it starts to explode in slow motion. And what has been zipped up all of those years gradually starts to come undone. Coming undone is a term that defines a mind that erupts mercilessly and involuntarily with the affliction of troubled thoughts and their accompanying feelings. The individual has lost self-control, has lost grip of their mind, as the mind haphazardly fluctuates between being indecisive, nonsensical, and confused. The guitar, it gently weeps and it screams as the mind pulsates between higher than low mood swings, where one can be short-tempered and abrasive, then solemn and unresponsive, flitting between a muttering madness to a melancholy muppet. And that unwelcomed grievance that seeps out of every orifice is a mental despotism that I often refer to as the apocalyptic mind. Apocalyptic means revelation, the uncovering of. Undergoing a mental apocalypse means that the artificial characteristics of one's outward persona are falling apart, and the unresolved aspects of one's deepest anguish are now exploding through the cracks of a fragile facade. Striking with vengeance, the apocalyptic mind will drive one totally insane in the membrane, where the individual can get lost within the maddening storm of a cognitive Pandora. The thinking can unreel into a state of bewilderment as the unstable mind grasps at the straws of an untenable reality. It is to be distraught, disturbed, and distrustful of the contents of one's own mind. There is an unrelenting sense of fraudulence that strikes the conscience, and one can't escape the ugliness, the wrongfulness, the incompetency, the immoralities, and the shortcomings of one's behaviors, which executes integrity and kills the confidence with the accuracy of expert marksmanship. We get screwed up because somewhere there is a screw loose. A part of the mind has become warped with contortions, unhinged, and then peeled away from its ability to function properly. And of course, when the mind is dysfunctional, it is incoherent, irrational, and past the point of self-realization. And I do speak from experience. I myself have once stood on the precipice of sanity, not knowing which way I would go, feeling vexed and verged by a visceral blot, wondering, will it ever pass? And I have taken that hard landing inwards to find myself collapsed in that lifeless space of depression where the primal scream has given way to the silent echo. And sadly, with chronic and non-functioning depression, we can fall into a joyless, loveless, and motionless void where the willpower is deflated and there is nothing worth fighting for. The will to live is so crippled that it's a struggle just to face another day of hardship, an effort to communicate, a fight just to get out of bed. And so seeking help and salvation is the last thing on one's mind. Depression, however, is not something to be endured, but rather embraced. It heralds the fact that we've ended up in the wrong place, living as the wrong person and dealing with circumstances that are just plain wrong for us. Depression is nature's way of saying you needed time out from the crazy show of life so that you can recuperate and reset, so that you have a space to slowly figure things out, to address, process, and reconcile with certain aspects of your life. Depression can be this beautiful gift in disguise if one can emerge from its deathly clutches and begin afresh with a new life, with new activities that expresses one's true nature. If, however, you bounce back from a depression without reconciling and absolving from that negative energy within, and instead you jump back on the crazy horse of life and you get back out there and start doing the same things again, then you have squandered that gift of reconciliation. Riding the crazy horse of life is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. It is to stay entrapped within the same lifestyle cycles that keep resulting in the same negative consequences that compounds the negative energy and makes you feel depressed. So if you have reached a point of enough is enough, if you are feeling sick and tired of being sick and tired with the way that you live, then stick around, because I'm going to reveal to you all of the different ways that you can treat and overcome depression. That said, I will not fool you into thinking that treating depression will be easy. I won't bullshit you by saying that the thoughts and feelings of depression will just pass in time. That in time things will get better, because that's a load of sweet talking rubbish. All time does is make things more familiar, normal, and acceptable, because the reality of depression can be that you must find a way out of a dark storm, even when there is no light in sight. And by no light in sight, I mean that you must keep moving forward, even though there is no promise, no confirmation, no clear-cut pathway that assures you of when things will get better. You must continue walking forward, blindfolded and in pain, even though every part of your mind and body is insisting that you stop and that you give up. But rest assured, and I am living proof, that not only can you overcome depression, you can also rise to unimaginable heights of joy and freedom. And the first hurdle you will find, which also happens to be your greatest dilemma, is that to overcome a state of depression, the depressed mind must climb out of its own depression and begin to function from a state of dysfunction. And as you can imagine, it is not easy learning how to walk with broken legs, but walk we must. And if we can't walk, we crawl until we can. Because if life does not go on, then life goes under, and we don't want that, because the symptoms of depression, if they remain untreated, they can worsen and they can cause you to sink lower and lower, of which the end game is that you can see no other way out than to vacate, than to check out and leave this earth. And again, that is not the answer. So please know that there is a way out, a way forward, and a way up from depression, whereby you can actually emerge from its tragedy into the greatest triumph, whereby you can actually become stronger and happier even after a very intense experience of depression. And to begin with, you need to take responsibility for your self-care and self-preservation and start taking remedial action in which to get the assistance, get the help, get the treatment, get the strategy to get your life back in order. So let's get moving toward defining the different treatments and solutions available in which to overcome a depressed state of being. And before I outline those for you, I want to explore the cause of depression, and this will make the solutions easier to understand. And here I'm going to narrow down the cause of depression into its most simplest, logical, and generic explanation, and so that the cause of depression makes absolute sense to you. Even though depression is a multifaceted condition with multiple symptoms that affects different people in different ways and at different stages of their life, we can still narrow down a definitive cause of depression that would apply to everybody. So let's begin with why a state of depression occurs. A state of depression occurs because you have an existential issue. Now, what do I mean by an existential issue? Well, let's begin with the fact that an existential issue could take place with just a part of your life, which is more akin to someone that has functioning depression, or an existential issue can take place across all of your life, which is more akin to someone with non-functioning depression. And there are three main elements to an existential issue. And those three main elements are that you live in a way that does not correlate with, does not align with, does not feed, nurture, nor fulfill the true nature of who you are deep within. The next element would be that you have experienced some type of tragedy, adversity, harm, loss, or injury that is causing you immense suffering that you can't seem to overcome. And the third element would be that you are lacking real purpose, worth, and hope in your life. Now, those existential issues that I've just mentioned can make you feel like a failure. They can result in a lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth, self-belief, self-respect, and a lack of self-love. Those existential issues can make you question why. And by this I mean that you start to question, why am I here? Why can't I find fill in the blank? Why do bad things always happen to me? Why can't things ever be good? Why does no one care? Why bother? And when these type of questions go unanswered, that's when you can start to lose faith, lose heart, or lose the will to live. You see, it's the why the why of a purpose, the why of a pursuit, the why of a person, the why of a deeper meaning, the why of a higher calling that resonates with the heart and soul on a profoundly deep level, that gives us the will to live, the strength to fight forward, the desire to survive and thrive. Because if you have a big enough why, you can get through any how, which means that no matter how tough, bad, unfair, misfortunate, lonely, sad, disappointing, and disastrous things can get, that your why, the reason why you are here, will keep you strong and pull you through. The why is the determination, the spirit, the inspiration, the fuck you, is that all you've got that makes you think this continues on my terms. Which now leads us on to the definitive cause of depression. Let's get to the definitive cause and the ultimate reason why we get depressed and remain depressed. And for that, we both need to explore the literal definition of depression. We need to truly understand the root meaning of depression. Okay, so let's first define what the word depression means. Depression is directly from medieval Latin depressionum, which means to press down, to depress. It is the act of pressing down, a state of being pressed down. And in clinical psychology terms, the meaning of depression is dejection, state of sadness, a sinking of the spirits. And let's be more thorough with this. If we break the word down into its respective parts, we have de, press, ion. De is a prefix that means to take away, to take down and lower. And when the prefix de is used in conjunction with another word, it means to undo, to reverse, to do the opposite of. Like, for example, to defrost, diffuse, and de-escalate, etc. Now let's look at the word press. Its etymology or root meaning is to exert weight or force against, exert pressure, to forge ahead, push one's way, move forward. In other words, it means to apply force. Now let's look at the word eon. Eon is a postfix that was coined in Greece, and it means action, to go. In scientific terms, ions are defined as atoms or molecules, which are the energy building blocks of life. Therefore, ion means life, the action and aliveness of the energy of life. Therefore, when we break down the word depression, it means that the force, the action, the energy of life is not there. It is lacking, it is missing. Which then begs the question, why is life not there? Why is there no liveliness? That's because when you have depression, you lack the impression and expression of life. And with what you have learned in this presentation about depression, it should make sense to you that depression is a state of being that happens because you are not being impressed by life and you're not expressing life in a way that makes you feel alive, in a way that nurtures and exalts your willpower to live and thrive. So let's dig into this a little deeper and explore the meaning of impression and expression. Let's start with the word impression. The word impression is a noun and it means to have an idea, a feeling, an image or opinion about something or someone. There is an image produced in the mind or emotions by something external. The mind has been imprinted with a mental representation and perception of something external. And if we break down the word into impression, we get the prefix of im, which means inwards, induce, influx, inborn, and pression, we know, means the force and energy of life. So with impression, it means that we are being impressed by reality. The reality of our environment, circumstances, and experiences are making an impression on us. And that impression that we get from life can be influenced, coerced, manipulated, incidental, or forced. And the impression that we get is the experience of memory, thought, and emotions. And these life impressions have been going on for a lifetime. From the moment that you were born to this very moment now, you have been, and you still are, being impressed by the experiences of life. And when we look at the conditions of depression, we can see that one of the major symptoms is that we have lost faith in, we are less engaged with, we are less impressed by, and have recoiled back and withdrawn from life. We are no longer being impressed by life. Therefore, if depression is the result of a lack of impression, we then need to ask, why are we no longer being impressed by life? And there are several elements to this. As you have journeyed through this life from childhood to adulthood, you would have experienced and internalized impressions of life that were detrimental to you. You experienced detrimental impressions, detrimental in that these impressions of life instilled fear, insecurity, trauma, and shame within you. And over time, these negative internalizations, they made you doubtful, hesitant, pessimistic, defensive, offensive, evasive, and withdrawn from life. And in particular, I will now address 3 types of detrimental impressions. These 3 interrelated types of detrimental impressions are false impressions, wrong impressions, and bad impressions. So let's define those 3 types of impressions. The false impressions are when you knowingly or unknowingly internalize a life experience where you have learned to behave in a way that is fake, inauthentic, incorrect, deceptive, flawed, misleading, disloyal, dishonest, corrupt, and pseudo. And these false impressions leave you unintelligent, naive, and ignorant, which means that you move against truth, logic, and reasoning, in that you make decisions based upon distortions of reality and where you are experiencing life in a way that violates your true nature, and subsequently you get things wrong often. Which brings us on to the wrong impressions of life, which is to have experiences that inevitably leads to mistakes that result in negative consequences, whereby as the result of an erroneous, inaccurate, faulty and flawed perception, you make a lot of wrong choices in life, and this results in a lot of bad experiences, which is the bad impression that comes from bad experiences. Something unsatisfactory, undesirable, unacceptable, improper, immoral, illegal, unethical, unpleasant, tragic, damaging, terrible, wicked, hurtful, traumatizing, life-threatening, harmful, evil, adverse, and destructive has happened to you. Now, when you have experienced enough wrong, false, and bad impressions of life, these experiences will be internalized as negative energy, the dark energy of false, wrong, and bad memories, thoughts, and emotions that have been impressed upon you, both in the metaphysical and physical sense. Which now brings us both onto the term expression. The root meaning of this word is from early 15th century, and it means action of pressing out, action of manifesting a feeling, a putting into words, a pressing out, a projection, an action or creation that expresses feelings, where X is a prefix that means out of, free from, outside. Therefore, if depression is a lack of expression, it's because of 2 important reasons. The negative energy of those false, wrong, and bad impressions of life continue to depress the mind and body because they are not being expressed out of the mind and body. Instead, they are being compressed. That negative energy remains bottled up and unresolved as this dark, heavy and disturbing psycho baggage that we carry around with us. We are wearing the dark cloak and dragging those heavy chains of the negative energy to a point that negative energy has debilitated the mind and body into a state of disordered dysfunction or discontent. The next part is that we are not expressing our true nature. This would be the natural God-given attributes, the talents, the strengths and the skills that we were all born with, because when you are aligned with your true nature, you have found your purpose, your calling, that thing that you're very good at and that you love to do. When aligned with your true nature, you are loving life. You are unfolding into this world. You are engaging with experiences that give you a good, right, and true impression of life. When expressing true nature, you are internalizing experiences that resonate. You love being you, and you bound into this life with excitement, confidence, and an unflinching self-assuredness. So, to briefly summarize the aforementioned, the definitive cause of depression is that we lack impression and expression. We become overwhelmed by a state of depression when we have committed to false, wrong, and bad impressions and expressions of life. And we can't overcome a state of depression because we lack true, right, and good expressions and impressions of life. So the solution is very simple. You need to find an expression, an outlet, and an impression, an inlet that will reverse the state of depression. And there are two actions that you need to take simultaneously where you express and impress yourself with experiences that will provide treatment and remedy to overcome depression. And they are that you need to find an outlet and expression for the unresolved negative energy within so that you can absolve and heal from it. And next, you need to be both impressed with and express life experiences that assist you with discovering and developing your true nature. And there are various types of life experiences that you can engage with, and you can overcome your depression with self-help or other help. You can do this on your own or with professional guidance or both. So let's define what those solutions are right now that will assist you to overcome depression, and we'll begin with you needing to find an outlet and expression for the unresolved negative energy within so that you can absolve and heal from it. So this means that you need to stop escaping from your existential issues and start addressing them. You need to stop self-compressing and start self-decompressing your unresolved negative energy. Start expressing the way you think and feel in a constructive dialogue. You need to start exploring, acknowledging, accepting, resolving and forgiving the negative parts of yourself and your life. So the first thing to do is to ease off and take a break from all of the ways that you self-compress, but not in a way that you cut yourself off completely, because after all, these are methods of coping, of soothing, of getting some pleasurable relief from a depressed state. And if you were to suddenly remove those methods of coping and soothing, then it could make you feel a lot worse. Therefore, what I'm saying is that you must scale back, reduce and limit the ways that you self-compress. You must start to create some free time and space in your life so that you can start decompressing that negative energy. And the best way for you to do this is in the stillness and silence. It is in the stillness and silence that you will come face to face with you, where you can allow the thoughts and emotions of you to come into your mind and body, where you will sit with them, explore them, question them, and contemplate them. It's during these periods of meditating on you in the stillness and silence that you will be confronted with your most darkest, disturbing, and revealing aspects of self. And you will need an outlet to express that dark energy of depression and dispel of it out from the mind and body. And there are several ways that you can do this. You can express that dark energy with journaling, writing, blogs, vlogs, poetry, and songwriting. And trust me, when you get your thoughts and feelings out of your head and onto paper, this will alleviate the tension and despair. You would have transferred that energy outwards. And as they say, it's better out than in. You can also express yourself through physical activities. So, for example, if you've got some pent-up emotions that are extreme, like hatred, frustration, upset, and anger, etc., then you can release that pent-up energy with high-impact sports like rugby, boxing, kickboxing, or using a punch bag. Or you can even release that build-up of negative energy through a more subtle exercise like yoga. The idea is that you find an outlet and channel to release your negative emotions. Another great way to alleviate and release from the unresolved energy within is through creating and playing music. So, for example, I myself have learned to write songs and play the acoustic guitar. Writing and playing music has become a great way for me to express my feelings, upsets, concerns, and views that I have about myself and the world around me. Whatever has been bothering me and that I need to say, that I need to express, the songwriting and guitar is my outlet and release. Next, you can express yourself by speaking with someone. You can let them know where your head is right now. And this will require you to have an open and honest conversation with someone. You may need to make an admission of guilt or regret. You may need to seek some type of forgiveness. You may need someone just to listen to you without interruption or judgment. And if you don't have anyone to speak to because you are alone, or if you think that it would cause more upset and harm by speaking to someone you know, then there are lots of free phone numbers, hotlines that assist people with mental health issues, where you can call people that will listen to you, that don't know you, and that will advise you. And the best thing you can do is to talk about your existential issues with a friend or a professional. Which brings us to the option of online groups and communities that specifically deal with depression and anxiety. These are great places to meet people that are dealing with similar conditions and circumstances, where you can express yourself free from judgment and get support from like-minded people. Next, you can get professional help from a doctor or psychotherapist. Your primary care doctor will be able to advise you on mental health resources and solutions, and this is a good place to start sharing your symptoms. You can also seek professional help from a psychotherapist to treat depression. And once you meet with a mental health professional, they will diagnose and confirm if you have a type of depression or if it's something else entirely. The other thing to consider is medication. Both your doctor and a professional therapist may suggest some type of medication. However, medication is not the answer nor the solution. Medication is only advisable in treating severe conditions and should only be utilized as a temporary alleviation and stabilizer. You should only really consider using medication to treat depression once and only once you have been fully informed of the protocol, side effects, and risks. Ideally, you want a mind and body that is biochemically functioning and self-regulating without the need for a synthetic intervention. Next up, you need to be both impressed and express life experiences that assist you with discovering and developing your true nature. And as we have discussed before, depression is by and large the result of living a life that is not fully aligned with the attributes of one's true nature, which means that you find yourself in lifestyle circumstances that do not resonate with, correlate with, nurture or develop your innate talents, characteristics, strengths and skills, and where your human needs and desires are not being met and fulfilled. Therefore, it's important that you plan for and cultivate objectives, goals, activities, ventures, and projects in your life that both expresses your true nature and that instills your mind and body with life experiences that leave a true, right, and good impression. Also, anything that you put into your mind and body, whether it be information, food, or drink, will also leave a good or bad impression on you. Therefore, you need to start feeding your mind and body with healthy sustenance. You would need to improve your diet with nutrient-rich food, and you would need to start consuming positive, life-affirming information. And a great way to make a good impression is to recondition your mind and body with positive affirmations. And you can do this by listening to motivational tapes and teachings, reading self-help books, writing down affirmations and rehearsing them. And it works because I remember a time way back in the day when I was climbing out of my own depression, where for many months from the moment that I awoke right before bedtime, I would put the headset on and listen to motivational videos and audio books. And I did that until I began to think positively like the people I was listening to, until I reconditioned the content of my mind with optimism. And of course, exercise is very important. It could be walking, running, swimming, weightlifting, yoga, or a sport like football or tennis. Whatever takes your fancy, because any activity that gets your mind and body into an active state will also get your body to release the hormones of adrenaline and endorphins. Adrenaline is the biochemical that gives you that pumped up and feel good, energized buzz, and endorphins are the body's natural morphine-like chemicals that provide an alleviating pain-soothing effect. And so, daily exercise will improve your state of mind and body, and it will also get these biochemicals activated and functioning regularly. So those are all of the different ways in which you can get help and treatment to overcome depression. Now, if you are in a state of non-functioning depression, all of those solutions that I have mentioned might sound good and make sense, and yet when you are in such a low state of being, just the mere thought of doing anything is enough to make you shy away from it. So you will have to take what I refer to as forced action. You may have to force yourself to do something that you don't feel like doing, which means that even though your mind and body is saying no, there is the part of you deep within, that spirit of you, that says, yes, we are going to do this, whether you like it or not. Another great way for you to get yourself to do something that you don't feel like doing, and even though it is necessary and good for you, is to create a psychological split. Now, what do I mean by create a psychological split? I mean that you will create a new character, a part of your overall identity in which to counteract the old depressed you. You will create this new character, this new voice inside your head that will be in charge of your self-care. This new character only has the best interests of your health, and so will encourage and motivate you to take action towards the things that will be good for you. And whenever the old depressed you is moaning and groaning and talking you out of doing things, this new character, this new part of you, will intervene and get you to take action. And next, I would advise that you start small. Start with baby steps. Start with one small task at a time. Make it easy on yourself by starting with one small change. Heal at your own pace and count each new action that you take to improve your health and well-being as a monumental shift that should be praised and rewarded. And when you start trying new things, don't hesitate to ditch what does not work and double down on what does work. Try many different things and make the necessary adjustments until you have found exactly what works for you, and take into account that there is no quick fix to this. Overcoming depression is a lifestyle transformation that should be committed to as a lifetime journey of consistent and sustainable action. And now that we are coming towards the end of this presentation, I want to share with you a spiritual perspective on how to overcome a depressed state of being. You can experience an instantaneous breakthrough and overcome depression and immediately alleviate from thinking and feeling depressed when you realize that you are not the depressed thoughts that you think, and you learn to disassociate from them. This realization and disassociation will become self-evident when you can master how to stop identifying with the thoughts, memories, and stories inside your mind. When you realize that those thoughts, memories, and stories are not you. When you can separate your conscious awareness, which is the true you, from the conditioned mind that is a result of learned experience. That's because depression is a state of being that is experienced through the thought forms that we have, and thought forms come from learned experiences in which we have learned to associate words or stories to the memories and emotions of the life experiences that we have internalized. And it is these thought forms or stories with their memories and emotions, these conditioned aspects of the mind, that carry the dark baggage of depression, not the conscious awareness. Your conscious awareness, that is the true you, is separate to and free from the conditioned thought forms. The conscious awareness is to be awake in the present moment of now with no thoughts of the past or the present. And when a thought form arises into the mind, into the awareness of your consciousness, you can choose to either identify with and attach to that thought form, or just allow that thought form to arise into the conscious awareness of the mind and then flow back out without you being reactive or affected by the suggestions and directives of that thought form. You see, we only feel the heavy burden of our darkened thoughts when we hold on to them, when we believe those thoughts are real, when we believe we are the thoughts. And I know that your thoughts can seem real. These thoughts are, after all, learned from the real experiences of life, and yet they are still just a learned experience. They are not the true you. You are the conscious awareness that is aware of your thoughts. You see, you were not born into this world with an identity. You learned an identity through the experience of memories, thoughts, and emotions, which to associate with and define the experience of your reality and the experience of being you. And the identity of you can be unlearned, and you can relearn a new identity with new experiences. So however it is that you identify with and experience you, just know that you are not those ill thoughts, not those frustrations, not the misery, the anxiety, the stress, or the depression. And the moment that you realize that you are the conscious awareness, the entity and observer that is separate to these learned experiences, you can then learn to let go of those thought forms, let go of those memories and emotions. You can transcend from them and liberate yourself. And the best way to learn how to dissociate from your thoughts is through the practice of meditation. When you meditate in the stillness and silence with no distractions and no stimulus to trigger your mind, you can then learn to be with an empty mind. And the empty mind is a mind without thought forms. And that said, unless you want to become a strict Buddhist monk, you can't spend your entire life in the stillness and silence. You can't meditate all your life. And we do live in a world and environment that constantly triggers and stimulates thought. And so it is impossible to cruise through this life in a completely peaceful and composed state of having an empty mind. So when we have unresolved negative energy within, those unresolved memories, thoughts and emotions that have been internalized, they still autonomously and involuntarily arise in and out of the mind. And so even if we are non-reactive to that negative energy within, we are still a mind and body that is the recipient vessel of that negative energy. And thus, to become more peaceful and composed within, we must resolve that negative energy to find salvation. And we can do this through the process of psychological resolution. Psychological resolution is to absolve oneself from the fixations, obsessions, identifications, attachments, addictions, conflictions, and anxieties of a neurotic mind, and instead cultivate a state of atonement. Atonement means to be at one with mind. The atonement mind is the cure for the apocalyptic mind. The atonement mind is the ultimate prize of mental wealth, where one has rekindled a love affair with the human in the mirror, where one embraces and rejoices in every fibre of their beingness with a loving, compassionate care. And that is exactly what I help people to do with my spiritual guidance service and with the Mind Games exclusive membership program, that is an online course that teaches people results-based techniques and strategies in which to cultivate mental and lifestyle wealth. So please do check out this program by clicking on one of the links below that are provided with this video. The Mind Games program and course will give you all of the psychological tools in which to overcome depression. So that's it, my friend. That's the end of this presentation. I trust that the content I've provided you has enlightened, educated, and empowered you, and that the information is of immense value and practical use in your life. And if you do think you have the symptoms of depression, then please do take immediate action to get the necessary help and assistance to overcome this condition. Also, if you think and feel that this content is something that would greatly benefit others, then please do pay it forward by liking and sharing this presentation from me. And that's it from me. Take care for now, with great love from me to you.